Let me back up a sec, because if you told me at the start of this day that an 11-year-old black girl sitting in first class would silence an entire plane with nothing but her last name, I'd have laughed and called it a bad movie script except. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. 1 second, the flight attendant's working her routine, all polite smiles, and the next, her clipboard hits the floor so loud everyone jumps, scattering the passenger manifest like confetti across the aisle. In the stunned hush that follows, you could hear a pin drop. All because of one word, Rockefeller. So here's the real story raw, and as close to the bone as I can make it. Zora Rockefeller. Just a kid with her nose buried in a battered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Not a clue that her very presence in seat 2A is about to shake the grown-ups around her. She's sitting there, cool as can be, while the white guy next to her, Harrison, suit sharp enough to cut glass, platinum flyer. You know, the type can't wrap his head around how a black child could possibly belong up here, sipping orange juice in the clouds with the so-called elite. He's not even subtle about it, nudging the flight attendant, then escalating up the chain of command because it just isn't appropriate, his words, not mine for an unaccompanied minor to ride up front. But before all that, we gotta rewind, see the morning for what it was. Philly International, Tuesday chaos. Zora's dad, Marcus Rockefeller, is barely holding it together. He's got that look anyone who's watched someone they love battle cancer knows it, that tired dignity. He fusses over his daughter, checks for her book, her pencils, her snack, every detail a tiny anchor to keep from floating away in worry. They don't talk about why he's not on this flight with her, just that he'll be right behind, and she recites the family rules. Be polite, be observant, carry yourself with dignity. Remember you're a Rockefeller. He smiles, but his eyes say he'd trade every penny of the family legacy for just one more ordinary day. First class is non-negotiable. Always was, ever since Zora's mama Leonard started saying life's too short for middle seats. The gate agent blinks at the name, tries to hide her surprise. Rockefeller, as in yes, those Rockefellers, kind of Marcus says, and you can hear how many times he's delivered that line, smoothing out the edges of history for the sake of convenience. Zora boards alone, head high, the memory of her mother stitched into every detail, the neat dress, the vintage satchel, the quiet pride. Inside the plane, everything is familiar, the recycled air, the fake leather, the low hum that settles nerves. Marion Delaney, chief flight attendant, meets Zora with practiced warmth. She's been flying longer than most pilots have been shaving, and she's seen every kind of passenger. But there's something about Zora, maybe the poise, maybe the sadness tucked in her eyes that makes her pause. They exchange pleasantries. Zora asks for orange juice, no ice, and everything seems routine until Harrison arrives. Now, Harrison's a man who expects the world to bend, and usually it does. He clocks Zora in his seat and can't hide the frown. At first, it's all quiet side-eye, but it doesn't take long before he's waving Marion over, dropping his voice as if secrecy makes his concerns more valid. Are you sure this is right? Maybe there's another seat. Maybe she'd be more comfortable elsewhere. Marion gives nothing away. She's heard every coded version of this before, but Harrison's relentless. It's not about her behavior, he claims. It's about appropriate placement, and the tension in the cabin ratchets up notch by notch. A silver-haired lady across the aisle, Mrs. Abernathy, finally calls him out. Is there a problem with having this child near you? She asks, voice as soft as a Georgia sunrise, but carrying the weight of generations. Harrison fumbles, tries to make it about policies and protocols, but everyone knows what's really going on, even if they pretend otherwise. Zora sits still, her book open but unread, hands clenched tight, doing what every black kid learns young: hold your ground. Don't make waves, let them underestimate you. The climax hits when Harrison, growing desperate, demands to see the passenger manifest, wants proof Zora's supposed to be here. That's when Marion, hands shaking just a bit, asks Zora to state her name for the record. Zora Elena Rockefeller. You could practically see the realization sweep through the cabine. A rich, black Rockefeller? That's not a story people are ready for. Marion's clipboard drops, Harrison tugs at his collar. The Abernathys exchange looks of quiet satisfaction, and Captain Chun, who's been drawn into the fray, suddenly speaks to Zora with a deference that wasn't there before. "Please accept our apologies, Miss Rockefeller." And just like that, the narrative flips. All the people who had questioned her right to be in first class fall over themselves to make her comfortable. Marion offers cookies. The Abernathys lean in with warm words, and Harrison shrinks into his seat, his authority crumbling. But Zora, sharp as ever, recognizes the bitter truth: it shouldn't take a famous last name to be treated with dignity. She's seen it before, adults who dismiss her until they hear Rockefeller, then scramble to rewrite the story in their heads. The meal service passes in awkward silence. Mrs. Abernathy tries to bridge the gap, gently drawing Zora into conversation about legacy and character, quoting her own grandfather's advice. "You can tell a person's true character by how they treat others when they think it doesn't matter." Zora responds with something her mother said. "Privilege is like an invisible backpack. You might not notice you're wearing it, but you should be mindful of how much easier it makes your journey." Harrison listens, his face softening, the lessons landing harder than he expected. After the turbulence, both literal and metaphorical, Zora and Harrison find themselves talking, really talking for the first time. They bond over To Kill a Mockingbird, trading stories of their mothers, one a literature professor, the other an English teacher, each teaching their children to look beyond skin and circumstance. Harrison apologizes, genuinely this time, not because Zora's a Rockefeller, but because he realizes he never should have judged her at all. Zora receives it with grace, but leaves him and us with 4 words that hang in the air: "I'm used to it." By the time they land in Chicago, the dynamic has shifted. Zora walks off the plane, head high, Abernathy's words echoing behind her, "But doing just fine, honey." Harrison, changed by the encounter, steps into his day with more questions than answers, the shape of his world subtly, but irrevocably altered. But the story doesn't wrap up with a neat bow, life rarely does. At O'Hare, Zora's Aunt Josephine greets her with open arms, picking up the pieces of a day that should never have been so hard. Later, Zora confides what happened, Josephine helping her process the injustice and the odd comfort in finding an unlikely ally. Harrison, meanwhile, sits through his high-powered meetings, distracted, the memory of Zora's composure replaying in his mind. Weeks pass. Zora's father's condition worsens, and she flies back to Philadelphia, running into Harrison again by chance in the airport. This time, the conversation is easy, mutual respect forming a bridge where suspicion once stood. He helps her get to the hospital, offers the small kindnesses that matter when your world is turning upside down. Their families, once strangers, find unexpected connection in the most unlikely circumstances. 3 months later, in an art lecture in Chicago, Zora, now 12, stands to ask a question about how personal encounters can change hearts in ways that art or protest sometimes can't. Dr. Elena Whitfield, Harrison's mother, answers with a conviction that comes from decades of struggle. When someone you've misjudged meets your error with dignity rather than anger, it creates the conditions for real change. Harrison and Zora share a look, both changed by a simple flight that turned into a collision of worlds. See, the lesson is this: sometimes it takes a little turbulence to wake us up. Sometimes a kid in first class is exactly where she belongs, and it's the grown-ups who need to adjust. The story lingers because it's not just about Zora or Harrison or even the Rockefellers. It's about how we all move through the world, what we see, what we miss, and the work it takes to close that distance. Now, I gotta ask, what do you think, honestly? When does someone really belong, and who gets to decide? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share your own stories, and if you want to help keep these conversations going, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we learn at 35,000 feet, sitting next to someone we never saw coming.
Xin chào các bạn, mình là Trinh, mình phụ trách viết content. Trên đây là những công việc của mình, là mình lên mạng xã hội tìm hiểu những video.
It is cold, yeah. Next one? Alright. Thank you, man. Hey, if you guys have any trouble, Let somebody know, please.
After the tree to hold on to. Yeah. Use the fence.